This week on Red Dead Radio, we go completely off the rails.
You tell him Nick's coming, and hell's coming with him.
Welcome to Red Dead Radio, the Red Dead Redemption podcast. I'm your host, Jared Petty, and as always, we're going straight to the wild, wild guest.
We're going straight to the wild, wild guest. We're going straight to the wild, wild guest. Yeah!
With.
Oh, Nick Scarpino. Hello.
Yes, hello.
I'm telling you right now, this podcast needs 100% more of a theme song.
You think so?
Yeah. Andy.
What?
Andy.
You calling Andy in from the other room?
Andy.
All right.
All right. When he comes in, we'll get him to do a theme
off
song.
the rails. Actually, we do have a theme song. We have theme music written by Brian Altano, friend of the show.
Okay. Does it sound like this? Red. Dead Redemption podcast.
No, it does not.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Andy would have done that.
Andy's
not here?
Andy's not
so
here?
He just walked in and was like, don't call Andy. He's indisposed right now. Is he pooping?
Not sure
don't
what's
worry
going
about
on.
it. Sorry.
We're recording semi-live here from the Kinda Funny Studios right now, where I work doing my day job, and now it's time for Red Dead Radio, part of the Hop, Blip, and a Jump Network, and Nick. As our wild, wild guest, we are thrilled to have you here. Mr. Scarpino.
Yes, sir.
The producer/seducer, at all, etc.
I'd like you to note that before we started the show, by the way, a very professional show. I'm thoroughly impressed by your organizational skills. You have a run of show. There are notes. You asked me to move one section to underneath a different section. That confused me. I just drew a line.
Okay.
I just drew a line with an arrow.
So did I.
And then you said, I have to ask you some questions when we get to the on the trail thing. I'm nervous about this section, so I'm going to put a little asterisk star.
You know
there.
what? It's going to be all right, my friend. It's going to be okay.
Guide me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope.
I'm going to guide you right into this. Let's start with your history with Red Dead Redemption.
I have zero history with Red Dead Redemption.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons I have you here. You are our first Red Dead Redemption fresh face.
I'm going to guess your audience is going to love the fact that I have zero context for this.
Actually, that's why we brought you here, because you, Nick, haven't played the game before and simultaneously are very plugged into entertainment and film and games as a part of Kinda Funny. And you really are, I think, the closest thing I know to a film expert.
All right, fantastic.
So we got you in here to talk about that part of your life that day in and day out, you comment on film. You've been a part of making films. You know your way around film. And Red Dead is perhaps more than any other video game franchise, a cinematically inspired game.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted you here to talk about that, because it's almost impossible not to be tangentially aware of the influence this game has. So you going to play the new one?
I would like to play the new one, actually. I think I will.
That's interesting. How come?
The Greg and Tim and the rest of the guys affect me in that way, where every once in a while when a big tentpole game like this comes out, did I say tentpole game like this comes out, everyone gets excited about it. And if I'm always the last person to get a code, if they give us codes. But if they get one more code, then I will download it and I'll give it a shot.
So they give it to you, you go out and you play the game. So what's the appeal then?
The appeal for one, I enjoyed the last Grand Theft Auto. I like GTA 5. It's fun for me. I like the open sandbox world, but the problem is I often lose. My attention span's very short with it. And so I'd like to jump in. I'd like to see if it grabs me. If it does, then it's an awesome experience that I'll look forward to, because I very seldom play games. So I always love it. I'm always pleasantly surprised when a game grabs me and I play it for like 20 hours. And I feel like that's time well spent.
Okay.
However, having said that, there's a flip side of that coin, as they said in Heat. I'm just going to be randomly misquoting movies.
I'm okay with that.
The flip side is if the game doesn't grab me right off the bat, I'm out.
Okay. What grabs you about a game like this? What are you looking for?
I need to be drawn into the narrative immediately.
Okay.
Immediately. And that's why I really liked the last Grand Theft Auto, but that's why I also bounced immediately out of the Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, how so?
I forget the main, there's three characters. There was Franklin, Trevor, and I forget the other guy's name. Michael. Loved Michael's storyline.
Okay.
Empathized with Michael. The used to be badass who now has a family, and he's kind of more of a dad than he is a criminal, and he's kind of trying to figure out where he sits in the world.
Just mirrors your whole story.
It's just me in a nutshell. Right?
Former mob boss Nick Scarpino.
Well, my last name's Scarpino. There you go. Not a mob boss, by the way. I think my family largely accountants. But I liked that, and I got drawn into that, and I was like, this is cool. And then of course they shift you over to the Franklin character, and I was like, okay, so now I have to get used to this. And then right when I was like falling in love with that character, we switch over to the psychotic Stephen Ogg, who did a phenomenal job as a voice actor, and we've had him in the studio a couple times. But it was just too much for me. I started getting kicked out of that, and I'm like, I want to see how all these characters' storylines are going to intertwine, but then I just also want to steal a really cool car and drive around. And now then I let a few days go by and I'm like, where are we at with this? There's too many things to track. There's another side. Oh, I forget it. I'm done.
Okay, well, that's fascinating to hear because a lot of the messaging that we've seen about Red Dead 2, we're just going to roll right into Shootout here because of that, which is our news section. A lot of what we talked about already and a lot of what we saw in that giant IGN preview blowout was this idea that maybe those lines are really going to be smoothed in this game in a way that they haven't been in many open world games before, where the distinction between main quest and side quest is something with a guy with an exclamation point over his head. And that, well, obviously you're doing this to get to the next part of that the narrative is life, that it's a living world and that everything kind of like real life is actually connected.
I love that. I'll see, it'll be interesting to see how they execute that. Because one of my biggest pet peeves is when I start feeling like side quests are work. When a game that's an open world game like that starts to feel like I have to go to work when I boot it up, when I start playing it, that's when I stop. To me, I'm kind of a completionist in that I want to try and do as much as humanly possible in a game. Otherwise, I feel like I'm letting myself down. Like I'm not getting the full experience out of it. But then when it starts to be like, hey, I need you to go find my dog, I'm like, no, dude, I'm not doing this shit. Like I'll actually get pissed at side quests sometimes. I'm like halfway through, or maybe 2/3 of the way through Far Cry 5. Was that the last Far Cry?
Far Cry 5 was the last Far Cry.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm like, what was GTA 5? Yeah, anyway, long story short. And I've accumulated so many side quests that I'm like, I just can't go back and find this bear. I can't hunt down this cougar. Like I just can't do these things.
Yeah.
When it starts feeling like a chore, that's when I'm out.
And yet when you played GTA 5, you found yourself drawn away toward the kind of immersive, emergent activities, the stuff that the make your own phone part ended up taking over the game for you, which by the way, I think is kind of the point of GTA 5. That's right. GTA 5, ultimately, they understand this about it. The reason they include a content creator, the reason an online mode works so well with it is because while there's a compelling story, it is largely about making your own fun. And they know that's what their audience wants. I think that's why cheats are always so prominently given. So is it the difference for you between that feeling that you're being forced into a side narrative for a reward as opposed to just being able to feel like you're organically doing what you want in the world? Or does it just, what makes it feel like work?
I feel like the whole, I don't know, the work aspect of it, I just think that there's, God, I don't know. I lost my train of thought there for a second.
That's okay. That's all right.
I had it for a moment.
Would you say your train of thought derailed?
It did derail.
Much as a train that hit a Sherman's necktie in the Old West might derail.
Let me get a little courage juice here real quick.
That's going to be the name of my. Tavern I open someday.
Courage juice?
No, Sherman's necktie.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Definitely, yeah.
No, I mean, I think for me, obviously, it's subjective. A lot of people just love to jump in there, but when the game starts feeling like it's either trying to give me too many just completely useless tasks to do, I start thinking this is a lot like real life. And then why wouldn't I just go live my real life, right? Like, I know there's a section. I don't know if we're skipping ahead here, but I know there's a section.
Just go right to it.
There's a section you had on your Rona show here where it talks about like they're trying to do some things that make it a lot more realistic. And the question becomes, it's all like subjective, of course. A lot of people like that. To me, I'm like, where is the line drawn between realism and fantasy fulfillment of a game?
Okay.
To me, I love jumping in and being put in situations that I normally can't. I can't get into a shootout, right? That's not going to happen in my everyday life. And
no,
if it does,
you really hope it doesn't.
I really hope it doesn't. But I can help a buddy out who's lost his dog. I mean, I keep using this dog as like it's a real option.
Yeah, what is with you and dogs?
I don't know. There are these weird, completely arbitrary side quests that you get put on that you're like, every side quest that takes me one more step farther away from the narrative of a game is one more opportunity for me to not want to play that game anymore.
Well, again, it's very early on, but the presentation we've gotten has had a lot of emphasis on the idea that those lines, main quest, side quest, or even the idea of approaching them with that nomenclature of here's a main quest versus a side quest, that may be blurred, that a lot of the design philosophy that's gone into the game is more about making this not a life simulator in the mundane sense, but a life simulator in the adventure sense, living an exciting life surrounded by people that are likewise living their own lives. And mean, they've talked about the system of the fact that people have routines every day, and that's a big part, and that those routines interact, but also that your ability to interact with people is going to be contextual based on what they're doing, what time of day it is, who they've interacted with before. And there's not this binary choice system of, well, this is obviously a trigger to the next event.
So I mean, my question for you then is, I mean, and maybe this is more of an overall overarching design question, is how do you tell a compelling narrative in a world like that where you can go? I mean, this is always one of my biggest beefs with these games, is that I get sucked into the narrative and then I go off on a side quest or a bunch of side quests for a while, forget where I'm at. The emotional impact of whatever was happening to me 4 or 5 or 6 hours ago after 20 tries on a side quest or whatever I'm doing is very much lessened. So I'm like, how important do you think the narrative in this game is going to be for them?
I think the narrative will be extremely important, especially since they've also made it clear they're focusing largely on one main character through who you'll experience the world through. In Arthur, there's a ton of side characters that you're intimately connected with, and those will act as the catalysts for a lot of what happens to you. But it is ultimately, I think, going to be Arthur's story, even though the Duchess gang is your kind of circle of trust for a lot of what takes place in your life. How do you make that work? I'm going to point to 2 games that I think provide some insight on that.
Okay, go.
And these are going to be weird for folks. First is Gone Home. Did you ever play Gone Home?
I did play Gone Home.
Okay, so Gone Home is a walking simulator that I don't think gets nearly enough credit for being one of the most brilliantly designed games I've ever played. Here's the thing about Gone Home. Even though it's a walking sim, it is not linear in any way, shape, or form.
No, but it's still a contained narrative experience, though.
It is, except that the narrative plays out for every player vastly differently. Here's my example.
Sure.
The house is laid out in such a way that you can interact with all the artifacts in the house in whatever order you choose. And it doesn't particularly drive you to move certain directions. I found a secret panel in the house within my first 2 minutes inside. I located a secret passage that was fairly well hidden because I was curious.
Sure.
I ended up taking the house from a vastly different direction than what I suspect many players did. Yet the dynamics of the order I encountered these things in were not altered by the game in response to that. The items were still laying where they were laying. The narrative played out for me in such a narratively satisfying way, despite the fact that I took it in a completely different order than somebody else could have, that I was stunned that it was possible the storytelling could make me compelled to that degree. There was a moment where I literally felt sick playing Gone Home when something I'd stumbled onto in the first 10 minutes played out 2 hours later in a different room. But that only happened to me and people who went exactly the way I did. Somebody who went a different direction still encountered those 2 things, but in different order with different things in between. And yet it was still, from speaking to others, emotionally impacting in a different way to them. I think that Red Dead may borrow from that design philosophy, the idea that the components taken in multiple orders all make sense and all add up to something that translates to a metaphor for real life in an engaging and entertaining way.
Well, that's the thing for me, right? When you talk about cinema, or you talk about just watching a movie versus playing an interactive experience, those are 2 separate, very, very separate mediums that when combined properly can become this amazing experience. Gone Home being one of those where you're like, wow, I do feel like I'm a part of this story. And I think that's when gaming's at its best. When you don't feel like you're watching it, you feel like you're a part of it, where you're drawn into it. The issue I always have, though, is that I feel like I'm drawn into it, and then I feel like I'm drawn apart, and then I feel like I'm just sort of like pulled over into the other door, and then it's gone. It's just gone.
Now, is the drawn apart a matter of just finding distractions out there that pull you into something you'd rather be doing?
I think it's a couple different things. One, I think there's a level of the interactivity, like the ability to interact with the environment, the ability to do things over again has always been a stumbling block for me. The idea that you get I always liken it to being like, that amazing scene in Infinity War, pick whatever amazing scene it is.
Okay.
What if you had to watch that 4 times in a row in order to progress to the next scene? That's always how I view games, right? As far as just being told a story or experiencing a story. And this is always an issue I've had. This is an issue I had with Uncharted. This is an issue I have with a lot of games like that, where you get to a point where it's this amazing cinematic point or this amazing climax and you fail. And then it starts you over again with the music. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm going to try it again. No, it didn't work. I'm going to try it. You know what? I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
To me, that's not that starts to dampen the emotional connection I have with anything that's happening in the game.
It is a break with reality. It's
one of those huge break with reality. And that's when you talk about cinematics in a game like this, you talk, I mean, even the image we're seeing back here, I mean, that evokes a specific emotion, and I love that. But if I see that over and over and over and over again, I'm going to start to lose connection to that very, very quickly.
Yeah, I feel like Red Dead's cinematic cutscenes, Rockstar cinematic cutscenes, are very well done. Their voice acting is excellent.
Oh, stunningly. I mean, what I've seen in just the trailers, granted I haven't played the games, but like in Grand Theft Auto, they're amazing.
But where I think Red Dead is stronger in a way than Grand Theft Auto, and by the way, I do think, we said this on practically every episode, that Red Dead Redemption 2 is the sequel to GTA 5 as much or more than it is the sequel to Red Dead Redemption.
Okay.
Is that the stunning moments, I'm replaying Red Dead 1 right now, the stunning moments tend not to be the scripted ones. The stunning moments tend to be riding across the ridge as the sun comes up, or something that happened to me the other night where I'm just in the loneliest place in the universe and a thunderstorm is rolling through and there's just no one around, and I'm there alone on a black horse in the middle of the night, and you can feel the cold wind and there's lightning, and I stop to take a look, and just as I do off in the distance, I just hear in the rain. And I'm looking, and there's somebody out there, and I don't know who they are. And there really was a jab of fear. That is not a scripted moment in that game. Yeah. It just happened that the weather, time, and random encounter conditions all coincided. Yeah, and yet it moved me more than a lot of cutscenes would.
But that's the power of the medium, right? Like the cutscene in games is just a tool, right?
What's it a tool for?
Well, it's a tool to move you from point A to point B for the most part with, in the story, in my opinion, right?
Okay.
And I think that commonly when people start talking about cinematics in game, you start using the word cinema in game, I think you're doing the game a disservice, because it should be looked at as just another tool in the arsenal of the designer to help make an overall amazing experience for the end user. In movies, it's different. In movies, something being cinematic describes the medium, right? Okay. It describes the experience. If you're saying, like, when I say something cinematic, it's almost like you're comparing it to a better product, and I think that's the wrong way to look at it.
When you say
games,
a better product, what do you mean?
When you say when you compare something and say, oh, that thing succeeded in being cinematic, like the game had great cinematics, or it succeeded in having a cinematic level experience, to me it almost says, well, cinema was there first and it's the better medium, but you're coming close to that, right?
Okay, so that's different for me. When I use the term cinematic in reference to Red Dead in particular, I'm using it in terms of the fact that the game's so feverishly drawn from cinematic inspiration and influence. I'm not really comparing it to something and being like, it's as good as film. I have done that for other games. And I think that logical falsehood or fallacy is played out in my mind before. I think you're absolutely right. In this game, when I use that term, I'm not referring to cutscenes. I'm not referring to the scripted stuff, and I'm not referring to the idea that it approaches film. I think that Red Dead, more than just about any video game I've ever played, is film inspired and attempts to be evocative of that feeling of being inside a movie. It is not trying to be a better movie. It is trying to be something that is very much a part of two different worlds.
I just don't like when people, and I love film, granted, and to each his own as far as whether or not you want to engage in games. It's fun to compare and contrast the two mediums, but I think a lot of times, at least in the mainstream people who don't play games, you see the argument play out of like, well, when is it going to be made into a movie to legitimize it, sort of, and I hate that. I hate that argument.
I hate that too.
I think it's just stupid.
No, they're different mediums. They're different pillars of art. If art is a temple, they are two of the pillars holding it up, holding the roof up. Absolutely. And they influence one another. But no, I think we are well past the idea that somehow film legitimizes games, or that a film having a game somehow legitimizes the film. I've played so many crappy games based on good movies. And I played a few good games based on crappy movies. And we can reverse that cycle the other way around. They are what they are. I think that Rockstar has done a lot to help translate our mode of thought on that. I think the GTA 5 in particular, we were talking earlier when we recorded Games Daily today, 95 million copies sold.
Of which one?
Of GTA 5.
Wow, Jesus.
95 million copies.
God,
that's huge for
huge.
But we always compare it to the video game industry. But what that's also doing is helping us understand that this art form stands alongside other art forms as a legitimate commercial venture.
Sure.
But also an artistic outlet that is speaking to vast numbers of people. I think that's important. What do you think? I don't know.
I do think it's important.
I have given up on order because we're jumping all over.
We are. I'm sorry.
So don't
Did you
worry.
want to talk about
no.
how you can play along.
No, we'll get there.
Or
we're gonna
Orphan.
we're gonna jump straight on back into High Noon.
Okay.
We'll deal with On the Trail later.
Got it.
Because we are already talking about westerns. I brought you on here to talk about cinematic influence because that's kind of your wheelhouse. You like westerns.
I do like westerns. And I think there's a certain romance and nostalgia to westerns that draws you into that, right? I think that there's so many different types, like we talked about before the show, like some of the classic westerns. You got a lot of the John Wayne westerns. You've got a lot of the old school, like classic era Hollywood westerns when bad guys were bad guys and good guys were good guys and the good guys wore white.
Literally down to like white hats.
Yeah, exactly.
And white outfits. And
I forget. I want to say it's Magnificent Seven. I want to say where Yul Brenner has like the white. He's like the man in white or the white hat. Maybe I'm getting confused on these. It might have been 310 Yuma.
No, I think Brenner wears a black hat in Magnificent Seven. I could be wrong.
I could be wrong about that too. But either way, I think that I love the idea of the Western, and then I like the idea of the Western deconstructed when you get to something like an Unforgiven. Right, where you have those old roles. It's. I love any movie that asks a very fascinating question right off the bat. Where in an Unforgiven, you have the question of that really just badder than bad gunslinger that killed everyone, but was just like fated to die. What happens if he lives to an old age?
Yeah. What happens if he somehow survives?
What happens if he survives that, meets a woman who kind of tames him down and shows him a better side of life? And then what happens when that woman dies and he's called back one more time into the darkness? I love that.
That sure sounds like Red Dead Redemption. Are you familiar with the plot of the first Red Dead?
No, not at all.
So when I talk about cinematic influence, and again, these tropes are a reason because they're good story devices for that kind of romantic, nostalgic, and deconstructive storytelling. And Red Dead does contain all three. That's pretty much John Marston's story you just described. He is Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven. Absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, that's kind of what you get. He's a little less grizzled, a little friendlier. He got out sooner.
And he got out sooner,
and his wife isn't dead.
Okay.
So he's still in that stage where he's trying to make it. That said, I want to go to the three things you just talked about.
Okay, go.
You use first the terms romance. Second, the term nostalgia. Talk about those two things in classic westerns, and then third, discuss what's being deconstructed. Like, talk about the two, and then talk about the deconstructive element that takes place.
Okay, you're gonna have to remind me of that when I get to the third one.
No problem.
The romance aspect of it, obviously, is just that fantasy fulfillment of being able to go to a bygone era, right? You have none of us can ever go back and experience what that must be really like. So seeing, obviously, that's what cinema's for, and especially period pieces like that. Seeing what this sort of idyllic version of what the West might have looked like, very clearly defined with some of the more classic Western movies, is always fun. And then going back and watching something a little bit more kind of what it really probably would have been like with an Unforgiven, where it's like, where it's hard and it wasn't lovely. It wasn't beautiful. And for the most part, it was just a terrible life full of just your family. You didn't see too many people. And we have that character, we see him where he's literally getting... Right, the first couple of scenes, he's falling down in pig shit.
Yeah.
And he's got to take care of his two kids, and the pigs are dying, and the farm's dying, and he needs money, and there's no way really to survive. And then he has to go. And then even the way they treat the killing in Unforgiven versus how it's treated in other movies, where it's glorified in some of the earlier movies. In Unforgiven, it's just this really sad, harsh reality of, the scene that sticks out in my mind is when they go to track down some of the killers, and they shoot one of them, and he's just there dying.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm thirsty. And Clint Eastwood goes, give him some goddamn water. Just give him the water. He's fucking dying anyway.
Yeah, he's just shot this man.
I know he's dead. I probably shot him to the liver. The guy's bleeding out right there. Like, give him some water. And then the other guy's like, well, you're going to shoot me if I go get him? He's like, no, I'm not going to shoot you. He's like, you're going to shoot me. And they have this dialogue where he's like, this very real dialogue of like, I'm not going to shoot you. I'm not here to shoot you. Just give him some water.
I'm shooting this man for the money.
We've killed him for the money already. He's already dead, but he's still alive. Give him some water. And then just the moral repercussions of all that. Yeah. And I think that's another one of the issues that you never really see in most movies in general, the moral ramifications of killing someone. And we see that through the character of, I forget the younger kid's character's name, but we see the reality through his eyes. He quote unquote comes in and says, I've killed a bunch of people. I killed him. Of course, we know he's full of shit because he can't even see.
Yeah.
And then when he finally takes part in this horrible act, it changes him.
Yeah, he throws the door open and shoots someone.
I don't want to do this anymore. He kills a guy and goes, I don't want to be in this life. I don't want to be you. this glorified character that I had before, this William Money character, I think was his name. I've always wanted to be you until I got a little taste of that. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, that reality is terrible. I want to run as far away from this as possible. And you see Clint Eastwood's character for what he maybe was back in the day and now what he's become. It's a beautiful, beautiful comparison.
Yeah, Unforgiven is probably the ultimate Western deconstruction. I think it's certainly the first one anyone interested in the genre should watch, but I almost feel like you should watch several old Westerns before.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have to just watch anything that Clint Eastwood did leading up to that, because he is the person who, aside from maybe like a John Wayne, has defined that media, like that genre, probably more than anyone, really. And he's done it at every stage, right? He's done it from I'm just a gunslinger with a movie like A Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
You've got, I'm the immortal gunslinger with High Plains Drifter.
I love High Plains Drifter.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Great movie. But
for people who don't know, describe the plot of this movie.
It is just about a guy who rides into a man with no name, who rides into a town that's being accosted by marauders, by these outlaws, and he's just the baddest guy with a gun, and they hire him to protect the town, and he totally screws with them the entire time because he's got you don't know who he is until the very end. Even that in and of itself is where you start to see an evolution of like, we're playing with this a little bit.
Yeah, that's a horror movie.
Yeah.
As much as it is anything. That is a horror movie.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great movie.
And he is the Grim Reaper, and it's fucking phenomenal.
It's freaking
You got
rad.
the Outlaw Josie Whale and a bunch of other movies that he's done, where you see him in different subgenres of Westerns.
And then you see him blow all this up. In Unforgiven, he takes those roles he played and he presents a vastly different take on that. And I said it was the ultimate. I said that movie Unforgiven was the ultimate deconstruction. It's the ultimate modern deconstruction. My favorite Western is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Which is John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. That is the progenitor of Unforgiven.
Interesting.
It is John Ford, the great Western director, John Wayne, the iconic John Wayne,
The Man with the Walk.
taking everything that they've built a lifetime creating in film and blowing it up in your face.
Interesting. I'll
And
have
saying,
to watch that.
here's what happens if you live your life this way.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a deconstructive Western. It's beautiful. Beautiful movie.
And see, those are the elements that I loved about Unforgiven too, right? You have the Gene Hackman character who's supposed to be the good guy and kind of is, but
Little
also
Bill.
kind of isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well, I mean, he's kind of, he's like, he's building a house. And he beats a man to death with a whip.
Yeah.
I mean,
But he beats the man to death with a whip because that's how he thinks you're supposed to keep law and order.
yeah.
Right, is by proving to everyone else, all the other bad people out there, that you're the baddest.
Right.
And
Which in itself is just twisted.
it's fucked up, but it's what I liked about that movie is that every character has dimensions. There's it's just gray area.
Yeah,
There's no good, there's no bad, there's no man in white and man in black, and you don't know offhand if you put all of them on screen together who's bad and who's good.
Yeah.
Until the very, very end.
Do you know who's ugly?
I do not know who's ugly.
Unforgiven's pretty spectacular. I want to ask you about another dimension of this.
Sure.
Unforgiven, obviously a huge influence on Red Dead. It's an outlaw story. It's a post-outlaw story. The Red Dead 2, being a prequel, is going to feed more into, I think, that Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars kind of world. Although I think it's going to have some Wild Bunch elements about the end of that time. Definitely some Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the era of the outlaw is ending.
Yeah.
By the time, Red Dead 1 happens in like 1911.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like the era is over. This one takes place in 1899 when the doors are slamming shut.
Interesting.
It's kind of like about the last great gang. And I like that. I like
cool.
that a lot. So it's going to bridge that realm between the kind of glory days of the outlaw and the end.
Well, there's something spectacular about a story that's fated,
Yeah.
Well, you kind of know how it's going to end for them.
Well, that's what
to a degree.
I think one of the reasons that the Star Wars original trilogy works so well is that it's about a fated world. Like there's this idea that there was everybody's all ragged. People have commented on this, that it's a lived in galaxy. But part of what makes that great, and it's a Western totally, by the way, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, absolutely Westerns. That there's this memory of greater days. There's one Jedi left, and there's this faded sheen to the whole world, and people just barely remember it used to be different. But it's an apocalyptic story. Lord of the Rings is an apocalyptic story that way. It's all about
It starts in a very bad place.
It's the shadow of a greater past, and all these people just living in like Crapsville. after that.
I love that, but and I love that because it leaves so much more to the imagination than we were given in the prequels. Unfortunately,
yeah,
it's when you start fleshing out that you find that it's a very thin veil.
Yeah,
you know?
they didn't add. There was but I think this will be a prequel that understands that about itself. Everything I've seen in Red Dead 2 gives me hope that they grasp what this means. We have gone off course, and I'm great with it. I think our guests are going to be happy with it too, because this has been a fun discussion. One thing I brought up Star Wars for a second.
Sure,
that's a kind of a derivative pseudo-Western.
Mm-hmm.
You're a film guy. What are some things that influenced Westerns you love, or things Westerns you love have influenced? Star Wars came out of Westerns.
Interesting.
Largely. What are some things that have fed into Westerns you enjoy?
Interesting. I mean, we're traditionally with Westerns just on the hero's journey, which is, I guess that's a broad answer and kind of a cop-out because that's every single story that's ever been told. Influences of Westerns that go into movies. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that.
Yeah, the most overt ones I can think of, you brought up Magnificent Seven earlier. I mean, that's Kurosawa. That's Seven Samurai.
Yeah, sure.
Or Yojimbo, which eventually becomes A Fistful of Dollars.
Which one was the one that went into Star Wars? Didn't he borrow?
Well, he borrows a ton from Kurosawa.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seven Samurai also. So that's kind of twice removed.
Right.
I mean, Han Solo is a gunslinger. You know, Mos Eisley is an old Western town. I mean, they're in a desert. It's so the cantina is absolutely everything there is a metaphor for an old Western. But Seven Samurai feeds straight in too.
And they're obviously leaning into that very heavily. We haven't seen Solo yet. I should preface this, but even some of the cinematography in Solo, where it's that iconic, we're dollying to the right as he unbuckles the belt or the little buckle to his gun at his waistline. I do love that. And, you know, even anything down to even Han Solo's costume design, where he's very clearly a gunslinger.
He's a gunslinger.
Yeah, straight up.
There's a freaking train robbery in Solo.
I mean,
we've seen it in the preview.
They have a gun. You know, in the original A New Hope, they have the famous Rita and Greedo Han Solo scene where it is literally just a standoff. They just happen to be sitting down.
And exactly. And I love that. That's very much it reminded me of Tuco in the bathtub. In The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where the guy comes in, Tuco's in the sud-covered bathtub alone, and a guy's got the drop on him. Dude walks in pointing a gun at him, and he's just like, I've been looking for you for years. And just flames erupt from the bubbles in the bath, and the guy falls over dead, and Tuco's like, if we're going to shoot, don't talk, shoot.
Just shoot.
You know?
Yeah.
It's very Han Solo.
But I mean, I also love that I also love some of the... God, I even love like some of the bad Westerns.
Yeah? What's a bad Western you like?
The Quick and the Dead. Did you ever see that?
Ooh, that is a bad Western.
Those are just like, they're so fun to watch.
Is that the Sharon Stone and Leonardo DiCaprio?
Leonardo DiCaprio. I believe Russell Crowe's in it as well. And if I'm not mistaken, the bad guy, again, reprising the bad guy role is Gene Hackman.
I love Gene Hackman.
I love Gene Hackman, and I love him as a good and a bad guy. But I love when they go south, where it's like you can tell they're taking all of those tropes of Westerns and plugging them in. But man, when we get to the end of this, it just did not work. It's like a Christmas a string of Christmas lights that you just forgot one or two bulbs that just don't work. You're like, man, we just screwed this up royally. What? But then you have like remakes like 3:10 to Yuma, which I actually thought was really good.
Yeah, me too.
And I was like, a lot of people gave that movie a lot of grief, which was weird.
I
don't get it either. I'm like, this is actually a really cool story that's being told. And at the end, the sort of way it ends, you're like, this is actually very fulfilling, I thought.
I thought so too. I enjoyed it a lot. It was well acted, well paced. It's an exciting movie, but it's got an interesting drama. The twists and turns are not predictable, but also don't feel corny. They feel earned
for sure.
Yeah, it's quite a film. I'm glad you brought up bad Westerns, because we talk very worshipfully about Western film on this show. The fact is, there are far more bad Westerns than there are good ones.
I forget where it was, but somewhere on this document brought up Wild Wild Guest. That's what it was.
Yeah,
Wild Wild West is granted it's a comedy, but arguably just not a very good
Will
movie.
Smith and Kevin Kline, two spectacular actors.
Great actors.
I believe Selma Hayek's in that. She's
Kenneth
wonderful.
Branagh is the bad guy.
That's right. So that's four great actors.
Great actors.
And
Western based on an old TV show.
Great theme song, which friend of Kind of Funny Cisco contributed to as part of Drew Hill.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch the original Wild Wild West TV show?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, see, I liked that a lot back when I was a kid. Don't remember any of it, but Robert Conrad, I think. was the main character in that. But yeah, you have movies like that where you're like, wow, this is not even a good popcorn movie. This is just we're just watching this. We're just watching this. Oh, Giant Spider, great.
Was it? Yeah. Oh, giant robotic spider. Yeah. That was a very Konami moment. Giant robotic.
Well, Kevin Smith
crab.
tells that story about that. Did you ever hear that? Yeah, it's lovely. It's
you can tell it if you want.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to steal from Kevin, but he tells a story of how he was writing as I go on to steal from him. He tells a story of how he was writing a Superman movie, and the producer of it wanted a giant spider in it. Yeah. And that producer ended up going on to produce Wild Wild West, and he said, I was sitting there watching this movie, and then all of a sudden, hey, he got his giant spider, and that's what happened.
This is like the Key and Peele skit about making Gremlins 2.
What was that?
Have you never watched this?
No, is it great?
Nick Scarpino, this is the most Nick Scarpino clip ever.
I want to tell you this, though. If this movie in any way, shape, or form denigrates Gremlins 2, or this clip rather, it denigrates it, then I will never forgive
This is a
Key and Peele.
celebration.
Because Gremlins 2, I saw by myself in a theater and thought to myself, that was the first time I remember thinking, wow, what a complete departure from the original movie.
This skit is the pitch meeting for Gremlins 2.
Okay, love it.
Yeah.
I'll watch that.
It's the pitch meeting. We'll watch it. It's like 3 minutes long. We'll watch it right after we record this. It's perfect. So good. So we talked a lot about film on this show and less about news around this. I hope y'all will be okay with the fact that we went more tangentially than normal. But I think what's important, before we leave film completely, you were talking a lot about older Westerns.
Sure.
What are some recommendations you have for people that might be more familiar with newer Western films, but old Western movies that are good intros to high quality ones that are good intros to the genre for people that want to go back and explore movies that are not just classic because they're historically important, but are actually really watchable?
That's great because I don't go too far back with Westerns. That's the only problem.
Okay.
So when you start getting below the 70s, late 60s, early 70s with Westerns, you really start getting to that, I think, an inaccessible area for a lot of modern film viewers. So I would start with anything that Clint Eastwood did in the beginning. I would follow all the Clint Eastwoods. I would probably do a Silverado in there somewhere.
Silverado.
It's good. See, the John Wayne movies, I think, are going to be too hard for a lot of people. They're not going to be accessible enough for a lot of people.
I think The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is the exception. That is still like a startlingly compelling movie even today. And the original True Grit's pretty good.
The remake was pretty good as well. I would throw Once Upon a Time in the West in there just to see how far you can make it in there before you fall asleep.
Yeah, that sure is a boring movie.
It's a really, really, really slow, really methodical movie that if you can make it through the first 20 minutes of that, you get a gold star from me. It's great. It's beautiful, beautifully shot, and an exquisite example of sound. We studied that in film school for sound design.
That is a film school movie.
It is such a film school movie.
But man, I
slept
can't
through
watch
every
it.
movie in film school. That's one of those. But yeah, I mean, Charles Bronson did a lot of great movies back in the day too. So
yeah.
We're
going to switch tracks for a second here because guess what? I've been playing through the original Red Dead Redemption.
Are you on the trail?
Yeah, we are on the trail now for a moment.
What have you been doing in there?
What am I doing? I've been doing a few things. So some friends are playing along, and I've been playing all the way up through the mission where you help Bonnie out with the cattle herd and bring all those back in.
How's Bonnie doing these days?
You know, Bonnie's all right, but actually next week's mission, the stopping point, if you're playing along, is called Hanging Bonnie McFarlane. Pretty sure things may not end well for Bonnie here.
Poor Bonnie. Yeah, that sucks for her.
Bonnie's interesting. She's a good character. You haven't played the game, so you're not familiar with Bonnie.
No, but now I know. Spoilers.
Bonnie is an assertive single woman who runs a ranch.
Okay.
Probably a middle-aged woman who I like a whole lot, except she's constantly going, Mr. Marston. That's about the only thing I don't like about Bonnie. Everything else about her is pretty great.
Kind of school marmish.
Going back to this for me has been a few things. I had forgotten a lot of stuff around about Jack, or John, pardon me. I'd forgotten John's dad was born on a cattle boat. He's an immigrant. That John's effectively a first-generation American.
From where?
His dad was an immigrant from Scotland.
Oh, okay.
And he points out the fact, I love how the game does exposition because it's not like, and now I will expose. You do missions, and between the missions, you have brief, not too heavy conversations with Bonnie, with her dad, with family, and little bits of his backstory leak out as he gets to know her better and better. And it's not like, well, this is important to the plot now, so I have to reveal my heart. It's just that you've been spending a lot of time with Bonnie.
Was that your narrator from Dukes of Hazzard?
Kind of was.
That was really good.
Duke boys.
Them Duke boys got into it again.
Instead, I forgot there was a time, and this has been one of the coolest things about playing through this, that I didn't know everything about John. Mm-hmm. When you meet John, you know nothing about him. Mm-hmm. You don't know who you're playing. You don't know why you're there. I mean, some guys throw you on a train and they're like, okay, go off and do something you obviously don't want to. Mm-hmm. And 5 minutes later, some dude shot you and you don't know why. It's great. And now that most of it, so the fact that you haven't played through this, I almost like love the idea of you going back and playing this just so you can experience who this guy becomes. Mm-hmm. It's really thoughtful, smart storytelling. And I'd forgotten that was such a compelling part of the narrative. I mean, I think about Red Dead today mostly as a game that I experienced through lonely moments or moments of my own making. And there's plenty of organic stuff that happens. But John's introduction as a character is really smartly done, especially when you go back 8 years and look at the state of video game narrative at that time, where it was usually just like, lo and then.
Right.
You're a film guy.
Sure.
And again, what's an example for you of good character background reveal in storytelling in films? Someplace where you find out about somebody, where you look into their past and learn more about who they are, told through a more organic process.
Huh. Jesus, you're throwing the hard ones out today.
I should have warned you about this one.
That's
probably.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is because that's what they do here, and that's been one of the most striking things about it.
I think, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. That's a hard one.
No, you think about it. I'm going to talk a little more while you're thinking. A few other things that happened to me. Completely forgot that I had to learn to hogtie people. So in the original game, I didn't want to hang out on the ranch. Mm-hmm. So I wandered for like 20 hours before I ever went back, which meant I couldn't hogtie anybody because I never went on the cattle missions.
Okay.
That was the first time I played, like years and years and years ago. Totally repeated the same mistake. I was like, why can't I hogtie people? Why do I keep having to shoot all my bounties? Why can't I capture anyone? Went back because I had to do the playthrough and the walkthrough to keep up with folks here. I was like, oh, I never learned to lasso. I'm an idiot.
It happens to the best of us.
The game makes it so overt. I was just so energized to get out in that world and explore and find my own fun that I didn't do what I needed to do to have that intrinsic and critical ability. And I repeated that twice. So that was an interesting discovery. I'd forgotten another clever storytelling device they use. I now have decided that I want to work at a video game company and I want to write dialogue for poker side quests.
Okay.
When you play poker in that game, it's a great Texas Hold'em engine. I love poker. I really enjoy playing poker. People just sit around and have conversations and they have these pre-canned lines. But each person has a kind of a distinct personality, and then you'll overhear things from the other room too, coming through from the bar room. And so you have these conversations and side quests or missions just come up in the talk.
Interesting.
They don't, you haven't found this quest. They'll just be like, there's been a lion down by and they'll start talking about it. Or things you've done will come up in the conversation. And it changes dynamically as the game is going on. I love that. I think it's really clever storytelling. Cool. I'd forgotten about
How long can you sit and play poker for? Can you just do that indefinitely?
You can play poker. You can play poker as long as you've got money to throw in the kitty.
That's awesome.
It's tournament style. So you buy a pile of chips, walk in, and then you play until you've won the tournament or you've cashed out.
Interesting.
And then you can just hop back and do it again.
Well,
if you clean everybody at the table out, you have to go to another bar for a while, and then when you come back, they'll be back. But you can play poker for hours. That's
That's fun.
God knows how many hours I've played Red Dead Poker over the years. I'd forgotten how the pacing works. It really is a moseying game. Mm-hmm. You can just take your time and it feels right. It's not dull. It's like kind of making your way along. You'd be talking to people on your horse on a mission, or when you're off alone, you mosey, and something will happen.
Yeah,
you're not going to get too bored, but you're not. It's very rare. I mean, the other night I was riding along, and some dude just literally rode out of the dark and attacked me, and I screamed and started shooting.
Sure,
but that's rare. That doesn't happen much, except for a cougar jumping on your head.
You should play Far Cry.
Far Cry 5.
Well,
I think it's
every 5 seconds you get assaulted by something in that game.
The pacing is much better in Red Dead than in Far Cry. It's not nearly as irritating in that regard. It's not irritating in that regard. It's kind of, and I shot a guy the other day, and I just, again, the way things interplay, his foot got caught under the horse, and he ends up getting dragged under a horse for 30 yards through the mud. And I grimaced watching. I was like, this dude just shot me. I was like, oh, I feel kind of bad for him. So that's been some of my experience playing through right now. Initial impressions. We are very early on in the game. We're going to have more of a talk about this on our next episode. We'll talk much more in depth about where we've been. But if you want to keep playing along, I'd love to hear your stories too. So write to mail@reddeadradio.com and let us know where you are. Next week's mission, playing all the way through Hangin' Bonnie McFarlane. And also I want to hear your side quest stories. Nick.
Yes.
Do you have an answer to that question?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I spent the entire time you were talking just listening to you.
Oh, okay. I was rambling, hoping that you were deeply. That's why I talk so long.
Oh, I apologize. No.
You know what? Don't apologize.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of high quality content we know that you demand. Our next section, luck of the draw, 4 suits, 1 card. Nick Scarpino, you draw the top card of that deck. We're going to get 4 random non-Red Dead related questions. The suit is spades. The question is from Randy. If you were sucked into a board game, like in Jumanji, which board game would you, Nick Scarpino, least like to be sucked into?
Least like to be sucked into.
Yes. What's a board game you just can't stand the thought of being sucked into?
Monopoly.
Monopoly. That was a quick answer.
And here's why. Because I feel like we live in the world's most expensive city and I can't afford anything. And if that were my life all the time, I would hate myself.
But isn't that your life all the time?
It is. But I don't want more of that.
But I mean, that's literal. How can you have more of what's your whole life?
Because if I got sucked into a game that forced me to only do that all the time and constantly be dealing with people buying properties and charging me more rent every time I land anywhere, I would have a conniption fit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like this answer very, very much.
What about you?
I think the secret is you're miserable. I think that's...
I'm miserable only from a monetary rent standpoint and not being able to own anything in this city. It's terrible. Yeah. I
think for me, it would probably be being sorry. The classic board game Sorry, where you're going around the board like Parcheesi style. I think I would be infuriated by that because people would always be stepping on my head just as I was about to finally reach that place I wanted to go and yanking me all the way back to the beginning, which is, again, kind of the rubber band that life sometimes feels like. So anything that really... board games at their best are escapism.
Yeah.
Games at their best, I think, are either escapism or education. But that's an education I don't need. I've already learned that fact.
Yeah.
I don't need to be reminded that just when you're at the edge of your dreams, you're sometimes yanked away.
just sucked right back in.
And that's what Sorry and Parcheesi are all about. They're all about disappointment.
I haven't played Parcheesi.
They're about the cruel randomness and chance utterly destroying you.
What game would you most want to actually get sucked into?
Oh, man. I mean, wow. I mean, Fireball Island's awfully tempting. Being attacked by a giant volcano that's shooting like lava and crap at you, like that sounds really. But I think if I'm actually being serious about it, I think I've got enough like D&D love in me that I totally want to be like the party wizard. My favorite board game of all time is Hero Quest.
Interesting.
Which is this super simplified tabletop D&D game from back in the day, and the opportunity to be like, I am Ragnar the Brave. Like, as awful as that sounds, there's no world.
Great.
Yeah.
I envy people who still play D&D. I have
D&D.
a lot of friends who you would not think play Dungeons and Dragons, but get together on have a weekly game going. And I love that and I envy that about them so much. Largely because I'm not talking like they do it ironically. They literally go and play the characters and get pissed off if people come and aren't taking it 100% seriously.
D&D's fun. Yeah.
It is fun.
It is fun. Are you a D&D guy?
No. I don't take myself that seriously.
Have you ever played any of the role-playing games that are designed around not taking it seriously?
No. Well, no. The last time I played Dungeons & Dragons was when Critical Role came over and we played with them, and I got made fun of the entire time for being short. And then prior to that, the last time I played an RPG was probably the Robotech RPG from...
Palladium Books.
Yeah, from Palladium Books back in 7th grade, I think.
That's right. Shout out to Kevin Sembieda there.
Dude.
There we are.
Dude knows how to draw.
Oh, he does draw some really cool stuff, doesn't he?
No.
Draws and writes. Really.
Was he a writer too?
Oh,
I just always remember seeing the images, like his last name was on.
He draws a lot of his own stuff, but he also writes probably the lion's share of Palladium stuff.
Interesting.
Eric Wojcik did a lot of stuff, and they use a lot of freelancers, and they have friends of the company that do stuff, but he writes a good portion. Like, he wrote Riffs. The original
really?
Riffs. That was a Sembieda book. Yeah. Yeah, he's an interesting dude. I met him. He's really, really interesting dude.
Yeah.
What about you? What game you want pulled into?
I'd love to be pulled into Trivial Pursuit just so I can have just a vast knowledge of useless information. That's what I want.
You just instilled with that?
I always envy people that are like, well, actually, it's like this.
How are you on the green wedges?
Which ones are the green?
That's the sports and leisure.
Oh, terrible.
The green wedge is like the end of Trivial Pursuit for me. That's what I'm done for.
We played last time we played Trivial Pursuit was against Jeff and the Achievement Hunter guys, and they ate our lunch when it came to sports. They just destroyed us.
That seems about right.
Yeah, pretty much every other pie wedge as well.
Just everything in the world. Success as a company.
Jeff turned into some sort of like a beautiful mind level genius where he just kind of like stopped paying attention to everything else, really focused on the piece, and just started answering questions left and right.
Oh, that's incredible.
It was insulting.
Heading out of Pony Express, this is mail, which you can send to mail at reddeadradio.com. That's mail at reddeadradio.com. This message from Dominic. How real is too real in games? Rockstar seems to be leaning more into uber-realistic systems with Red Dead Redemption 2. You need to retrieve your hat if it's shot off. Meat will rot if left too long. And your horse will need long-term bonding if you want to control it well. Nick, what are your thoughts on this? Oh, you don't like that?
No, it's too much of a there's a thin line for me between a fun mechanic and a distraction. And the fact that like you got to bond with a horse. I think Zelda had that too, right? Where it wasn't like in Breath of the Wild where you had to like jump on the back and like, or what was it? Was your whatever the animal was? Yeah, you had to like break a horse in. I was like, that's cool the first time. But every time, are you kidding me? And then, although I will be honest though, when it came to cooking, I was like, I'm dreading this. And then I started cooking in Breath of the Wild, and I was like, I love this mechanic.
Yeah.
So, but I just feel like it does beg the question of like, how far do you go before you are doing a life simulator when you should just put the controller down and go out and live your life? Like I have meat, I have meat that's in my fridge right now that's probably rotting that I have to deal with that on a daily basis. So why do I want that in my escapism?
Don't ever play NetHack.
What is NetHack?
NetHack is a video game that takes that kind of realism to a degree that is almost unfathomable. That and Dwarf Fortress is that way too.
Oh my God, forget it. Like, I mean, granted, from to each his or her own, right? If you love that level of depth in a game, and I use that term depth loosely because I think it's mostly just distraction. Good for you, but I feel like there needs to be a balance struck.
Well, my guess is that they will. Rockstar knows how to make a game. They know what's fun. GTA.
But I mean, if I have to keep going and get my hat, or else I get a sunburn, and then my health goes down, that's going to annoy the shit out of me.
My guess is your hat's not going to get shot off much. I mean, that's the thing. I think that these are all neat details that are there to make the world feel more real.
Sure.
But they also understand how, for example, there used to be a lot of criticism in GTA games of the driving. And so the driving improved in every game. In GTA 5,
and the shooting.
And the shooting. In the GTA 5, your driving and shooting skills are affected by how much you practice them. But at the beginning of the game, you can drive fine and you can shoot fine. It's just at the end of the game, if you practice them a whole bunch, they become even easier. There's a smoothness. You go back and restart, you're like, oh man, I don't corner as well, but you don't notice it when you're starting. I suspect it'll be like that, Nick, that these will be interesting systems where you're not going to feel incompetent and become competent. You're going to start competent and become more competent. And
That's fair. That's fair. It's just, I mean, I think there are two types of gamers, right? I think there are people more casual like me who just want that 10 to 20 hour experience, and I kind of want the narrative kind of streamlined for me. And there are people that just want to spend a ton of time in that world and see every single aspect of it. And I don't begrudge people that. I think it's a lovely way to spend time if that's what you're into. But for me, I draw the line when my meat starts going sour.
By the way, how are we doing on time? Speaking of time,
I'm fine.
12 minutes.
Oh, we have 12 minutes. Oh, we have another thing.
Then we're probably gonna push the rest of the mail this week to next week because we got another thing going on. So our final thing, the Red Dead Radio Poker Tournament, which we always love to do here. Our current champion, Greg Miller, pair of nines. This is completely random. So.
It's random, but it's also there's a lot at stake here. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know if you know this or not about me, I'm the champion.
I've heard
so I
you're
have
the champion.
to beat Greg.
Well, 5-card draw. Tell me how many cards you want.
Do I get to look?
Take a look.
Let's see here. Okay.
This is completely random. No betting strategy. Just a random.
Louise.
Yeah, this is
I
the only
hate
choice you have.
poker. You
All right.
got to be kidding me. Hold on.
All right.
Oh, man. Do I go for it? Do I go for
It's
it?
just got to beat a pair of nines. Yeah, just a pair of nine. All right, Nick. Not like we got to record another show after this.
No. I mean, this is a big deal. Should I show the audience my hand?
You show the audience if you want. Yeah.
So this is what I'm dealing with right now. I need a jack for a nice straight. Can we get this up here?
All right.
So I've got
you're gonna try to draw
ace,
for-
king,
Ooh.
queen, and a 10. If I give him the 6-pack and get that jack, it's a small percentage, but I could be unbeatable from here on out.
You're effectively trying to draw an inside straight right now.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well,
Because then the only other option is what? I mean, I'd have to just ditch.
I mean, in my opinion, you never draw for an inside straight and draw poker. In 5-card draw, you never go for an inside straight.
What would you do if you're a big daddy?
I'd play safe. I'd go for the ace.
You go for the ace?
But you,
so just throw them all out and try to get an ace?
But you may be a gambling man.
I'm not a gambling man.
You're not. If this is a jack, you're going to die.
Oh my God.
No!
Son of a bitch.
No.
Son of a bitch.
Could add a pair of queens and beating Greg Miller.
Well, let's not tell him this happened.
Well, there we are. Greg Miller remains the Red Dead Radio poker champion. Nick Scarpino, thank you so much for coming here. Friends, if you want to write to us, mail at reddeadradio.com. Also, if you'd like to contribute to the show, because we are user-sponsored, if you want to come and be a part of that, you can go to reddeadradio.com or patreon.com/Jared Petty. We'd really appreciate it. There's some wonderful Patreon exclusives and rewards there. You can also support Hot Blip and a Jump, our diary/documentary/essay series, which is a pretty groovy thing. I think you're going to enjoy that as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're listening on Android or iTunes, don't turn this off yet, because please go and give us a rating. Please give us a review. It helps so much. And subscribe. Nick, thank you for being here. Where can folks find you?
They can find me at youtube.com/kindafunny or youtube.com/kindafunnygames. Or if you want just small witticisms, you can find me on Twitter at Nick_Scarpino. Important to note, Greg, if you're watching this, he had 3 more cards to draw on that one. I just want you guys to know. He drew 1 card, but I had 3 more chances to get that ace.
That's not how that works.
So, Greg, you are a cheater. You are a cheater.
No, that's not how that works.
In real poker, that's how that works.
Cisco Man, thank you so much.